Okay, we're here with Nick Hodgson, owner and partner of Astrogems. Nick, you want to start by telling us how did Astrogems begin?
Yeah, about 15 years ago, I was staying at an ashram in Southern California, and me and a friend who pretty much came up with the conclusion that we both wanted a 9-gem bangle. And so I phoned around. There were a couple of Vedic gemologists in America at that time, and I asked them if they could make one for me, and both of them declined, saying that their speciality was only in pendants and rings. And so it pretty much left to our own devices. We got permission from the ashram supervisor to go out and seek the appropriate gems for the 9-gem bangle, or what is known as the Navaratna. Nava meaning 9 and Ratna meaning gem. It's a fairly common term in India and Sri Lanka. And so it took me about a year to find the gems of the right quality and size to come up with a full collection of 9 gems. And then it took me quite a bit of time to find a jeweler, and working with several jewelers to try to make a design that was going to be comfortable to wear on the arm, that was going to maximize the skin contact with the gems, and that was going to last, a lifetime. And that was quite an art form in itself. So I was back in Australia by that stage, and I made the Navaratna bangle, and very thrilled to finally finish the product and the project, and didn't give a second thought that I would ever be involved in the future in making 9-gem bangles. So I wore it, and I analyzed the influence of it upon myself, being fairly cynical that I'd actually feel anything. But I was quite surprised, because I definitely felt, for me personally, I felt an improvement in my concentration in my meditations, which is a very easy way to measure whether you're able to focus the mind clearly or not. And I also noticed a interesting side effect, that my digestion improved. So that was good enough for me. That was just fine for me. Plus I liked wearing something on my upper arm, and it felt good. And it was a long project, finding the right stones. So anyway, I obviously had friends who saw it and were interested in what it was about, and the easiest way to explain it was to lend it to them. And so I had one close friend at the time, and he borrowed it, and I saw him a couple of days later, and his impression of it was much, much greater than mine, and the impact it had on him was so great on him that I actually thought he was pulling my leg. I thought he was just having a wag, and wasn't sure whether to believe him or not. But anyway, he was very sincere and asked me emphatically if I could procure the gems for him. So I did. It took quite a few months, but I now had developed some lines of contact and sources of supply. So we made a 9-gem bangle for him, and he was very happy with it. He noticed that it really affected his well-being. It affected his some patterns of his thinking. He was perhaps a little bit more cynical than he should have been, and this made him happier. He felt the bangle made him more positive by nature. And a key thing that he said that I learnt as a fairly recurring testimonial statement in future years was that he said that things didn't bother him as much. And I've heard that said to Charlie and I so many times over the years, where a person who's particularly irritating, a situation that's particularly taxing, when experienced after wearing the bangle, seems to have less negative impression, less negative impact, less irritability than it did beforehand. And that was something that he had conveyed to me very clearly many times. So anyway, as the years went by, probably another 3 or 4 years, I made a lot of 9-gem bangles for friends, and I would go visit a jeweler and give them the templates of the design that I had made, and quite an elaborate process, and I just did it out of friendship. I had no thought or concept that this would be considered as a business idea by myself. And but over a period of time it dawned on me that I really loved being involved in something that I felt was a extremely valuable science that needed to be relearnt and reintroduced and made available to the general public. And of course this was before the internet had got a foothold. So at the time it would have been very hard to open a storefront and say Navaratnams for sale. So there really wasn't beyond the immediate organization I was associated with and the people who were very interested in yoga and yogic sidelines, I didn't really think that it could ever be able to pay the rent. So however, all that changed, and an idea whose time had come seemed to come along. And having made quite a few for friends, I'd learnt a lot about the jewellery industry. I already knew a fair amount about gemology and geology from having always been very interested in that since childhood. And it just sort of its own process led me into starting the business, and I was really privileged to be involved in something that I could believe in, that was definitely an enormous aid to mitigating suffering and irritation on many different levels. And I think to date now we've probably made over 1,000 9-gem bangles, and it's been a very interesting learning curve, analyzing and discovering how to make as inexpensively as possible a very high quality instrument of benign electromagnetic radiation. And I say that because when I first took up the subject, of course I voraciously would try to read everything on the subject I could lay my hands on, and I would quickly discover that there's a lot of authors out there who have very little experience but love to write. And because of that, their conclusions definitely weren't in agreement with each other, and at the same time couldn't be verified by experience. So I developed an attitude of keeping my eyes open and being open to whatever testimonial feedback that would occur in a consensual manner over a period of time I could empirically garner. And it led to some very interesting discoveries. It led to the fact that the larger the gems were often even far more beneficial, so that it wasn't a good idea to limit the gemstones to 2 or 3 carats, especially in the softer materials like garnet, red coral and pearl. It led to the discovery that laboratory-grown crystals were also crystals grown using the laws of Mother Nature, and though dramatically less expensive, based on empirical feedback observation, seem to have equivalent or more potency because of their greater quality in chromatic tone, meaning the perfect colour that they were aiming to abide, which is related to resonance and frequency, and it's another story in itself. And so we came up with several twists. Another thing that Astrogems was unique in its approach and discovery was that I realized that the surface area of a gem is very important. In other words, if you want a lot of electromagnetic transfer, you don't put the tiniest facet of the gem on against a person's skin, but the widest surface area, so the electromagnetic radiation can transfer more cleanly and ably into the person. You can get the maximum benefit out of the gem. And so there were several policies, as it were, that we developed based on empirical feedback and not based on supposition or opinion or feeling. And I could go on, but that answers a question on how Astrogems evolved.